Zhezhi is coming back in the version 2.3 anniversary banners on the first half, and let me tell you, she is quite a desired character. But with the sheer amount of banners we're getting, should you pull for Zhezhi? Well, here are Zhezhi's biggest pros and cons. The first thing I wanted to mention is the fact that Zhezhi, to this day, is still our best Glacio damage buffer, as well as our best skill damage buffer. While competition has come out recently, Zhezhi is still the best in both of these roles. Let me explain why. First of all, the Glacio amplification front. Well, that's because she's the only one there is. There is no one else capable of amplifying Glacio damage with their outro skill. While Glacio damage buffs do exist, for example in Baizhi's S6, nothing is as strong as Zhezhi's outro skill, giving 20% amplification towards Glacio damage. So right off the bat, Zhezhi is already the best in this front. But what is more interesting is the skill damage front, as here she has a bunch more competition. She has recently gotten competition from both Brant and Contarella. Both of them have just as much skill damage amplification in their outro skill, however, they are different in the details. For example, Zhezhi has 15% energy for free for the next resonator after she uses her outro skill. This is something that Contarella and Brant do not share, but Contarella and Brant are able to heal. Is this really that relevant though? In a game where Shorekeeper and Farina are the best supports in the game, and they can already heal, having another sustain in your team isn't really that relevant. So you're rather looking for offensive utility. And when we're talking pure offense, well, let me tell ya, Zhezhi still is a force to be reckoned with. She's doing more damage than Contarella straight up, because of the fact that Contarella needs more energy regen than Zhezhi. However, if you have good enough substats to where Contarella gets enough ER while not sacrificing any offensive stats, you are looking at around the same level of damage. As for Brant, this man can do a stupendous amount of damage, higher than Zhezhi, but in order to do this he needs to run a full offensive set instead of a supportive set, and Zhezhi is still running Empyrean Anthem on her own. So at the end of the day, she's still having a bigger impact on team performance than Brant is. Obviously, Brant and Contarella have their own use cases. For example, Contarella being with Don Jin and with future Havoc characters, and Brant obviously being the best in slot with Chong-Li, but Zhezhi is the best generalist skill buffer we have. The next point is perhaps the biggest thing that Zhezhi has going for her, which is the fact that she is the best in slot sub DPS with 2 top tier carries. Not just one, but 2. Because, you know, one wasn't enough. For context, Zhezhi released in version 1.2, being the intended sub DPS for Jinhsi. Sure, it was not a perfect match, because she gives Glacio damage amplification, whereas Jinhsi is a Spectro character. However, it was still the best thing we had at launch, and to this day still is. And while we have gotten more additions in the form of Contarella, and also Brant for skill buffing, as well as us getting Zani soon to buff Spectro, none of them are as good as Zhezhi is. Zhezhi has coordinate attacks, personal damage, a shorter rotation than all of them, and all of this while still having that wonderful skill buffing outro skill, as well as giving 15 free energy to Jinhsi. She is still the best in slot support for Jinhsi. And then when we start looking at Carlotta, who came out during Zhezhi's first rerun, we're looking at yet another top tier carry that is perfectly synergized with Zhezhi. Unlike Jinhsi, Carlotta is actually Glacio, so she is able to fully benefit from all of Zhezhi's outro skill buffs. The energy that Zhezhi gives is also instrumental for giving Carlotta the smooth rotation she has. Zhezhi allows Carlotta to need barely any energy regen, so if you have Zhezhi, you no longer need to pray for ER rolls as if your life depends on it. And not only do we have this energy regeneration, as well as that perfect outro skill, there's also just the fact that Zhezhi is able to run Empyrean Anthem, which is one of the best supportive sets in the game, especially because it increases Zhezhi's damage by quite a lot. And I don't think I need to explain to you all why being a good character with Carlotta is such a valuable trait. Carlotta is arguably the best DPS in the entire game, so being her best in slot partner gives Zhezhi a ton of value. Next up, I want to talk about the fact that Zhezhi has some very good personal damage, and out of all of the sub DPSs, hers is the third highest, only being beaten out by a String Master Yinlin and a Brant with Unflickering Valor. But something that everyone knows about those two characters is that without their signature weapon, their damage output plummets. Now sure, if we're trying to evaluate every character on a standard weapon, then Zhezhi is not that much better. But when we start bringing other limited weapons into the equation, you can start seeing the fact that Zhezhi is still a very formidable character in terms of damage output. Yinlin was essentially meta purely for the reason that she had good damage back during her release. And Brant is also a character famous for being a strong quick swapper because of his damage output, so losing to the two of them, it's honestly should be expected. But all of the other sub DPSs, they're losing to Zhezhi. Cantarella's energy regen requirements are too strict, and she doesn't gain any offensive benefit of them unlike Brant. Rocha just kinda lacks damage, there's not really anything special to say about her. Obviously her damage output isn't bad, but it's not as good as Zhezhi's. Zhezhi also has excellent potential to grow for skilled players. You see, one complaint that a lot of people have about Zhezhi is the fact that her rotation takes longer than that of other supports. However, I can't say I agree, because Zhezhi has access to one of the best techs in the entire game, being the jump cancel. She is capable of jump canceling every single one of her forte skills, allowing for a much faster rotation on your Zhezhi's end. You're able to cut off more than an entire second off of her rotation. And if you don't know how powerful 1 second can be for a rotation, then let me tell you, it can impact you a lot. DPS is damage per second after all, so if you're cutting off an entire second, that is a pretty substantial increase. It's not exactly a hard tech to do either, it just requires some practice. You just have to press the jump button whenever Zhezhi reappears when using her skill. So honestly, with some practice and checking out Zhezhi's animations, you should be able to get this almost every single time. So hey, if you're willing to learn that tech, you're able to solve one of the very few problems that Zhezhi actually has. But to prevent this from becoming a glaze fest, I do have to mention one negative for Zhezhi that can have a pretty big impact on some people, which is the fact that her ult cooldown can be pretty awkward within a Jinhsi team. You see, Jinhsi's teams are all about rotating incredibly fast throughout all your characters. Jinhsi has only 5 seconds of field time per rotation if you're using all of her animation cancels. But the issue comes with the fact that Zhezhi's ult cooldown is 25 seconds. This can become pretty hard to mesh into your rotation in prolonged fights, because at a certain point, that cooldown's going to catch up to you, and you will no longer be able to use your Ultra skill with the regular standard rotation. However, there are some things to mitigate this. First of all, you can start your tower run by using Zhezhi's Liberation immediately. This gets the timer ticking while you're focusing on doing all your support stuff and making sure all of your buffs are up. And ultimately, this means that you'll be able to use your Liberation sooner on subsequent rotations. And if you're in such a long fight to the point where Zhezhi's cooldown is not ready yet, you can just do a couple more basics and a skill afterward. It's not like it's the end of the world. Sure, you might be using like 2 extra seconds, which you should be able to make up with jump cancels anyway. And, well, you're playing Jinhsi, it's not exactly like you're going to struggle in endgame much. But those are just my thoughts. What do you think of Zhezhi? I think that to this day, she's still an incredible character, especially thanks to the launch of Carlotta. That's what made Zhezhi a true top tier. She was already good before, but now she's just even better. Now let's see how long it's going to last. Let me know in the comments below what you think of Zhezhi. And while you're down there, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot. And if you have any questions, you can join my Discord, which is linked in the description. I'm pretty active in there, so if you ask a question, there's a pretty good chance I'll respond. But that'll be it from me. Peace.